When people nowadays think about Buddhism, it is almost universally the practice of modern meditation that comes to mind, at least for the average person. The mental image that springs up is usually one of a relaxed person with eyes closed in a sitting posture of any kind, but most of all in some kind of lotus posture or any, a variation of that. While sitting is surely an integral part of the practice, the reason why is essential, and what role it really plays is often just repeated from other sources without giving it any second thought. Today we want to shed some light on the role of the sitting posture in meditation. Well, but as pretty much always, let us start with a few examples of what sitting meditation even means or is for various people. As you might imagine, people mean vastly different things with it, and sometimes the results of such practices move you in an entirely different direction from what we teach here on this channel as an example. Yet the most popular kind would be some kind of pleasant or calming breath meditation, where the person in question usually sits on a meditation cushion in the lotus posture. Well, I hope I pronounced cushion right. Cushion. Yeah. They intend to sit, and more often than not, they explicitly do it to gain a degree of calm and meditative pleasure or absorption or any kind of focusing or whatever people usually associate with that kind of pleasant meditation. It is not rare that the practitioners of such schools follow certain recipes or methods, patterns, techniques that allow them to get to that goal quickly. You do certain things, go through certain motions, follow certain advice, and then you get to your pleasure. Yet another kind of sitting meditation would be akin to the method of no method, or choiceless awareness, where the practitioner just sits down to explicitly do nothing. Instead of following a recipe, they allow the experience to unfold rather naturally based on the prior intention to sit and do nothing. Well, this is not actually, nothing. It is clearly much less than is usually done in meditation, and this kind of practice is vastly different from the pleasure style that I mentioned before. In this case, the sitting is just the most inactive posture out of the 4 available ones, and as such, it is a naturally good choice to do as little as possible. And the last type of sitting meditation that I want to highlight is what we often explain here on this channel. We call it non-activity, and people naturally assume that it is more or less the same as a method of no method from before, which is quite natural, as it does not seem obvious what the difference would be. Yet that is absolutely not the case. Non-activity is sitting down with the intention to do nothing, indeed, but we very well know that that's not really possible. Mind and body kind of always do something, so we do not aim at stopping that at all. Instead, we aim at stopping every activity that we can influence, which is all the activities that are rooted in greed, aversion, and delusion or distraction. As the Suttas suggest, the sitting, in this case, is first intentional, but becomes more and more a byproduct of the non-greed, aversion, and delusion over time. That's a very crucial difference. The non-doing of everything versus the non-doing of greed, aversion, and delusion. Now that we have a rough idea of different styles of sitting, we can go a bit deeper. And by the way, there are obviously a lot more techniques, so please do not see this as an exhaustive list or overview. Yet more often than not, people feel challenged in their views of what the practice actually is when someone proposes a different interpretation of the suttas. As a result, they usually pick a few suttas that allow for an interpretation of what they do anyway. And yeah, this is not such a good approach. While this kind of defense mechanism is very natural and very human, it's not necessarily a good thing, at least not if liberation from suffering is your goal. If your goal is to gain pleasure, then by all means do that. That's perfectly fine. But if your goal is the most sublime thing, namely the ending of suffering, then it will likely not get you there. And you have to reconsider very carefully what you do and what you spend your time with. Yet what comes up most often is a citation of either the jhana or the metta meditation, where the Buddha describes that kind of practice, the sitting down, in very broad and very general terms. Those descriptions usually start with a stock phrase like, herein a monk having gone to the forest or the root of a tree or to an empty place or hut, sits down with legs crossed, keeps his body erect, and his mindfulness alert. This is usually followed by the practice of choice. In most cases, it is either metta meditation, modern metta meditation, or modern jhana meditation. Yet, suttas like this, in this case, offer little insight into why the practitioner should actually sit. In fact, many other suttas suggest that you can also do those very same things while walking or in any other posture too. Not only can you do that, but you even should cultivate your mindfulness and your meditation in all the other postures. Yet most people have no access to that kind of state that they cultivate through their meditation at all, unless they sit down. So, what is the role of sitting meditation really in the practice? Is it mandatory? Are certain kinds of meditation only possible while sitting? Is there some special thing or some special aspect about the sitting? Is sitting a cause or an effect, a result? Is it a tool? There are so many questions that could spring up when people would bother asking, but they never really do. They just take the posture for granted. While everyone would certainly agree that you have to sit at some point, everyone should also agree that the practice overall should happen 24/7 if you really want to be free from suffering. Otherwise, that one remaining hour, or whatever you leave out of the practice, will obviously be a weakness. And that time you could still suffer. So it's not really an escape from suffering, it's just a pause. But anyway, how do the suttas portray sitting, and what role does it actually play in the process of training or taming your mind? I could now start throwing sutta references at you in an attempt to convince you, but I think I have done enough of that in the past. If you are really interested in such discussions, Sutta Central is full of that for you to look up, but I do not think that is very fruitful or very beneficial for your own practice. I mean, you can do it, but I see it mainly as a distraction. You should understand craving and not read posts on, I don't know, Dhamma Wheel or Sutta Central. Instead, I want to focus on those aspects of the practice that basically all agree upon and that maybe draw some connections. And the first thing that everyone agrees upon would be that craving must be abandoned fully if you want to stop suffering. Well, I say that everyone agrees here, but that is not necessarily true. Many of the modern traditions do not even mention craving anymore. They make the practice about entirely different things. But those who are somewhat serious, let's put it like that, have identified craving as the chief aspect that causes us to suffer, because the suttas say pretty much nothing else. And this includes greed, aversion, and delusion, or distraction, as those are our default responses to the three kinds of feeling. Greed, aversion, and delusion are the three aspects of craving. And if you read the Pali Canon, you will find basically nothing mentioned as often as that. The desires and passions must be stilled if you want to be at peace. And there's no way around that. And one can easily argue that the Buddha only really taught what a person does in line with the Dhamma, or simply meditation when there is no longer any greed, aversion, or delusion present. This is a distinguishing mark. And by the way, this does not include immediate cravings right now, but craving overall, as I have demonstrated in a recent video and in many other videos of the past. Craving happens on various different levels, on various different subtleties, let's call it like that, and on various different time frames. And most of it is invisible to you. Yet all of it has to vanish if you want to attain a jhana, or a meditation, as the suttas call it. The suttas do not even really distinguish between concentration meditation and insight meditation at all. Usually, concentration is depicted as a result of cultivating the entire Noble Eightfold Path for a very long time. That is what concentration is, not a short, break from craving on a cushion, because you cannot really have a break from craving. That's not possible. If your craving sets it right back in when you get up from your cushion, then you have not surmounted it. You have not uprooted it. Craving is still there. You just have fulfilled it for a time, so you are at peace. But that is a very worldly kind of peace, as everyone in the entire world has access to that. If you crave chocolate and then eat chocolate, you are at peace for a while. This is why most people do it. They eat the chocolate because they get something out of it. And what the suttas sometimes mention is serenity, or simply a state of non-craving. But that is usually not a technique. It's not a technique at all, even. In fact, basically not a single modern technique has been mentioned in the suttas. Those all rely on heavy interpretation and commentarial aspects that twist the practice in a very modern way. Further, as the suttas also mention meditation in basically all postures, especially walking, and the sitting posture cannot really be mandatory either. So in that sense, it must be something else that is doing the work. There is some other aspects that you must do or not do. Yet the thing most people call meditation are not really accessible to them when they are walking or standing. So in that sense, sitting is not really special. A mind without craving, that is what the special aspect is of meditation. Yet in the pursuit of fairness, some of the formless attainments are indeed only possible while sitting. Yet the Suttas are very clear that those are not mandatory either. Only the first jhana, or the first freedom from craving, as you could call it, is. And the other jhanas, up to the fourth, are very well attainable while walking. It is just that the formless liberations, that are not mandatory, by the way, not at all mandatory, those can only really be attained while sitting, for the most part. At least that is how I understand them. So if we take all that available knowledge from several suttas, and not just those that we like, and come up with, we can come up with a rather different rule of sitting. In that light, meditation, which could also be called samasamadhi or jhana, is not confined to any posture. It is about your freedom from craving, and freedom from craving has to be there in all postures. Otherwise, it is not freedom. It is a freedom from sensual values, sensual views, and desires. Things in the world simply do not provoke any lust anymore, and that is a source of first great relief, then joy and calm, and later a kind of mental healthiness that you could also call equanimity. In the light of that, the posture is kind of secondary. It is just that you have to be in some posture, and sitting is most convenient for long periods. If there is nothing to chase, nothing to do anymore, what can you do but sit down and enjoy your feelings of freedom? And that surely would not stop when you get up if you are truly free. Then you are free all the time. People often think that we advocate for not sitting at all, but that is not true. It is just that the role of that sitting that we attribute a different role to and a different value to. It is not a vehicle to attain pleasure. It is more or less a convenient posture to be in when there is nothing left to be done for now. The posture, in that sense, becomes a byproduct of the practice and not a stepping stone. All the jhana and metta descriptions usually start with a practitioner that has purified his mind thoroughly so that there are no evil views left. And as a result, sitting is the most calm and enjoyable thing to do, even though it's not really an action anymore, as they have abandoned greed, aversion, and delusion, at least for now, but it could grow back. And even the often cited stock phrase of jhana does not contain any instruction regarding sitting. Those descriptions usually just focus on what is relevant, on what is hardwood, on what is essential in the practice. And in this case, for example, Majjhima Nikaya number 39, they focus on the absence of the 5 hindrances as the entry point and condition for jhana to arise. There's no sitting, no breathing, none of that. Just a complete absence of craving. That is what the important part is. The rest is literally just a side quest at best. Neutral in the best case, and harmful if you attribute false values to the non-essential part. And the Sotapanna knows essential, as the Suttas say, and non-essential as non-essential. Sitting, as a product of the practice, just like samadhi, is the result of practicing an entire lifestyle of meditation for a very long time, a lifestyle free from craving. Samasamadhi is simply another word for living a life devoid of craving. And you can only really live a life free of craving when you no longer value sensual things, when you no longer see sensuality, which is an attitude or view, as good. If you no longer see sensuality as good, then you don't see it as good while sitting, walking, standing, and lying down. It's not just that you see it as bad when you sit. That does not make any sense. You do not sit to practice. You sit when there is no more to do for now, or you sit simply because you are tired. That said, the value and views can totally come back, and you cool that possibility down by spending as much time as possible in a state free from craving, in a liberated state. That said, it is, again, only liberated when there is no view left that could introduce a sense of lack that you make your that would make your samasamadhi limited. Because whenever you have a value still left, whenever you value anything in the world, at any other times when you do not have it, there is a sense of lack. It can be very subtle, but it is there. It is always there. So do we have to sit? Do we have to walk? Well, yes and no. There are certainly times when we will be in the sitting or walking posture for health and comfort reasons. But that does not mean that we must immediately close our eyes to cultivate calm and pleasure. All of that should be a natural result of non-craving. If you don't crave, you sit. What else is there to do? You have nothing to attain. You are, right now, without your craving, the happiest person in the world. You don't have to get anywhere. You don't have to get anything. You, as a result of being the happiest person in the world, just sit down. That's it. So what you must do, or well, non-do, is be free or secluded from craving. And I think that is undebatable. just as it should be undebatable that physical seclusion assists with mental seclusion from craving. A drug addict that tries to get clean from his drug of choice surely should not sit next to a pile of his drug. He should be as far away as he can and then try to be free from his drug. And not only that, but you have to be free like that at all times and in all postures. So there should not be any value left in that drug or in sensuality. And when that happens, there's a huge amount of relief. That is the state that you want to cultivate. So in essence, all the jhanas and meta descriptions start when a practitioner has already been cultivating the path for quite some time and very successfully. Way before that, we have already undertaken lots of training to purify the mind from evil views, which also include sensual views, as the Suttas suggest time and time again. The entire Anguttara Nikaya is full of those suttas. Once there are no more of those views left, as a result, craving can no longer arise for now. That is when the fruits of your practice start becoming immediately visible, inviting, and to be experienced by the wise. And that state must be cultivated further and made much of, as the Suttas suggest. The person who has both discernment and serenity should further deepen and refine that until that state becomes irreversible. And just as a last small remark, you can still sit and probably even should, yet you should not do so in order to obtain pleasure. And if you have cultivated that kind of meditation for a long time, you should probably not close your eyes if you get used to it. If you have cultivated meditation with open eyes, then maybe close them or meditate in an entirely different posture. While sitting, instead of following your recipe, simply purify your experience of any immediate craving by restraint and of subtle underlying sensual views that will surface at some point if you deprive yourself of that, getting to that for a very long time. And you want to also cultivate a sense of seeing danger in the slightest fault. You want to see those things. You want to see the clinging, the craving as dangerous and impermanent. Make the meditation less of a tool to get or to claim, but more of a methodic way of throwing away all your possessions by making them seem to you unsafe and undesirable. You want to attach a negative connotation to all those things, to your values, to your desires, to your attachments. And in doing so, your mind will automatically remind you of the lack of substantial value in all those things. And as such, at some point, it can become automatic. That is the practice, the throwing away and unburdening, and whatever remains, that becomes your meditation in all postures and at all times. But anyway, let us now come to the most important points. Sitting is often seen as essential, but it might not necessarily be the case. It might be helpful to see it as a byproduct of non-craving instead. It is a convenient posture to be in when there is nothing to do or when your body is tired. The posture in itself is secondary for the practice and at best a byproduct. What matters is your freedom from craving. If you are free from craving, you are at ease. This is a goal of the practice, but it requires a lot of training. It's not a matter of willpower, and it's not a matter of going through certain motions or methods. You must be free from craving, and craving is an attitude. You cannot perform a little dance and then expect to be free from craving. That's not how it works. You must change your attitudes. You must change your values. And if you have only access to your peace, or while or after sitting, it might be good to reassess your practice. Freedom starts when there is nothing left to do, when there's no more craving. This is what we aim at. Anyway, this should be enough for today. If you enjoy what I do, feel free to like and subscribe and do all the YouTube stuff. But until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.